Chapter 3 already. This chapter, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about those costs that we were talking about in the prior chapter. We talked about product and period costs. Now we're going to throw them all together and sort them out a different way. So we have 5 different types of costs, and instead of grouping them by product and period, we're going to group them depending on the behavior of the cost. I'll explain what I mean in a minute. One of the things that a cost can do is be variable. The other is it can be fixed. Variable costs change with the levels of production or sales. When production or sales levels change, this cost would change. For example, you could have direct materials. The more you produce, the more you're going to spend on direct materials. That's going to go up or down depending on what your production does, goes up or down. However, something like let's see, how about property taxes? You have property taxes on the factory building. They're levied usually based on the value of the building, how big the property is, where it's located, its current value will help determine what its property taxes are. But what doesn't do anything to the property taxes is how much you're going to use the building for production. So if you run 3 shifts and you're producing just as many as your machinery and current labor force can handle, their property taxes aren't going to be any different than if you run 1 shift and they're barely working. You're still paying for the same property taxes on the same building. So we say that that is fixed. And I want you to be careful of something. It doesn't mean that the cost never changes. Property taxes can change. New things are levied, the value of your building can go up or down, but would still be considered a fixed cost because there's no correlation between it and what's happening to production or sales. So that can be a little tricky. You can also, let's say that we have direct materials, and we've decided that to make our product takes 2 yards of fabric, and they're at $5 per yard. So we would say it's $10 per unit per product that we make. We always call them units. It's kind of a weird word, but so every one of the products that we make takes 2 yards of fabric at $5 a yard, so it takes $10 in direct materials. Let's say that's the only direct material. The direct materials cost is going to be $10 per unit no matter how many we make. So if we make 1,000 units, it's $10,000. If we make 10, let's say 1 unit, it's $10. The point is that it's always going to be $10 per unit. So unit cost stays the same. Total varies. Always $10 per unit, but it can be $10,000, $10, whatever in total, depending on how many we make. Now let's look at a fixed cost. Let's go with the example of the property taxes. And we're going to say they're $5,000 per year. Down here, if we make 1,000 units in that year, then we could say it's $5 per unit in property taxes. I know it's kind of weird to allocate the property taxes per unit, but that's really what we're doing. We're looking at how many units and how much of each unit has to go to cover property taxes. Now imagine if we only make 1 unit. it would be $5,000 per unit. So that one unit has to make us enough money to cover everything, including property taxes, that are $5,000. So that product must be a very expensive product, or we're going to be in the red. We're going to have a net loss this year because we're not going to get enough money from selling one product to cover all our costs, including property taxes. But notice what happens. Unit costs vary, but the total stays the same. Kind of trippy. The questions can be very strange, is it'll ask you, with variable costs, does the total stay the same, no matter how many are made? Or with fixed costs, it can phrase the questions in strange ways and make you think it's asking for one when it's really asking the other. So be careful. Is it asking you which one does the unit cost stay the same? Or which one does the unit cost vary? Or is it asking you about the total? Identifying which one goes in which category is usually pretty simple. The story problems will tell you very significantly which way it goes. If you read the story and it says that it's so many per unit, every unit that you make costs this much in labor, overhead. So some common variable costs, as we talked about, are direct materials, like that for anything, direct labor, and then some of the overhead. Some things in overhead, like utilities, would be considered variable. Some of the selling expenses. So in this category, we're including things like selling and some of the administrative expenses. So those would all be considered fixed or variable. Now fixed would be some of the overhead, such as factory property taxes and other things too. Some of the selling expenses and some of the administrative expenses. So our 5 categories are now being sorted differently. We don't have product and period, we have fixed and variable. So part of your chapter is going to be to understand which ones are in which, being able to label them correctly, totaling them up, figuring out what they are per unit, and so on. Another part of your chapter is going to talk about what happens when a cost is somewhat variable and somewhat fixed. Those are called mixed costs. Sometimes we know the breakdown. You could sign a contract to rent a copy machine or a printer. Maybe it's a printer, copy, fax machine, and you pay a flat amount every month, but then so much per copy. That would be the variable component, the amount per copy. The more you use it, the more the cost goes up. But no matter whether you use it or not, you're still paying that set flat fee for having it each month. So it has a fixed component and a variable component. There are times when you see a cost and you're trying to figure out, is it fixed or variable? So you look through many months worth of the cost. And I'm trying to get to an example in the book. So hang with me just a second and we'll take a look at it. I want to double check your homework assignments to make sure I know which ones you're assigned in this chapter, and we'll find one to look at. Here's one. Let's look at exercise 3-39 on page 107. We're not going to do exactly what it calls for here. We're going to do something different, but I like stealing the data out of it because it makes a good base of information for us to do the problem with. you can see that they gave us all of last year's costs related to deliveries. Deliveries varied, let's see, the top one's $1,200. I see some that go as low as $1,050, all the way up to $2,200, I think is the highest cost, and that was in December. Then when we look at the number of deliveries, that varies tremendously. March, there was only 85 deliveries, where one of the months was 590 deliveries. It's like that was June. Being a florist shop, yeah, probably June weddings, stuff, probably a lot of deliveries. We are going to try to separate from those costs a fixed component and a variable component. This easiest way to do that is called the high-low method. Your first step is find the highest month Gotta be careful with that one. When we say the highest month, the one with the highest activity. In this case, it's number of deliveries is our activity. So when we find our highest month using that, we're looking at June. 590 deliveries, and then we bring the money along with it, $1,980. That is not the highest dollar amount month. So we would mess this problem up if we didn't grab it according to activity. The second one is find the lowest month. And again, I'm going to go through the activity, and that happens to be March. And there's only 85 deliveries, and it's still $1,100. You would think it'd go down a whole lot more than that. 590 didn't cost us even $2,000, but 85 cost us $1,100. So there's a pretty big fixed cost in this. So we're going to subtract the difference here. I'm going to say 590. I'm just putting the information here so you know what I did. And 1980 minus 1,100. So our differences are 505 and $880. And our fourth step, divide the dollar amount, the difference in dollars, by the differences in activity. So that's 880 divided by 505. And it's not exactly $2, as you can see, but Excel was set to just show. So I'm going to show it as dollars and cents. You can have more decimal places, but I would not go to less decimal places. So it's about $1.74. And this is the variable component. It's going to make it be a little weird, but you can pick either the high or the low month. I'm going to do it each way. So I'm going to start with June. June's total was $1,980, and we know that equals the variable part of it plus the fixed part of it. And we're trying to use this formula to help us break down how much of the $1,980 is fixed and how much is variable. Well, so far we've figured out that the variable is $1.74 per delivery. So I'm going to rewrite the formula again. It's 1980 equals $1.74 times the number of deliveries plus the fixed cost. I know this is going to get repetitive, but I want all the notes to be here good so that you can see them and remember how we got to this. So it's $1.74 times, and the number of deliveries they made that month was 590, plus the fixed portion. And you see now that I've got all numbers except for fixed. So when I work this math out, I'm going to be able to find out what the fixed amount is. But one thing I need to do is $1.74 times 590. And I'm going to come back up to this formula here. So it's really going to be $1.74 with all the decimal places on it. And I have my 590. And that works out to that. So we've got 1900 equals, that's not going to drop it now. I'll just move it over myself, 1,028.12 plus a fixed portion. So 1980 equals, and we can subtract it. So let's say the fixed, we'll put that all by itself, equals 1980 minus 1,028.12. So the fixed is equal to I know, I'm taking a long time, but I really want you to see where all this stuff is coming from. Well, that's not going to help you. 1980 there we go, equals the 1980 minus this. So the fixed portion is $951.88. So June's formula is 1980 equals the $1.74 per delivery, or we could say times the number of delivery, plus $951.88. So we can say that this is the formula. Now let's see if that works for March. If I substitute in March, let's see if that works. March's dollar amount was $1,100, and we would say it's approximately $1.74. I know there's some decimal places on it, times the number of deliveries, and the number of deliveries was only 85, plus $951.88. So March's 1,100 would equal whatever $1.74 plus 85 is. So I'm gonna delete that out of there and come back to that in a second. We'll go 85 is the number of deliveries times, and go up and grab our per unit amount. So this is going to be $148.12 plus $951.88. Oh, helps if I type right. Okay, March's works out to being 1,100 equals, and then when I add those two together, get $1,100. So March is 1,100, and that works out according to the formula. So we have figured out the formula, and we can say that the universal formula, or the estimated formula for deliveries, the cost is $1.74 times the number of deliveries plus $951.88. Why do we care? Because when we budget and we try to figure out what next year is going to be, if we can estimate the number of deliveries to be done in a month, we can get the total delivery cost or a pretty good estimate of it. And if we're playing with fixed and variable, now we can throw up here, sorry for scrolling so much, into the fixed category, we can put the fixed part of delivery costs, and over here in the variable, we can put the $1.74 per delivery. We know the unit cost, just like we can say $10 per unit for materials. We can say $1.74 per delivery, and we have a variable component. So now we can break them into their fixed and variable. That's going to help a lot when we're doing all the things that we're going to be doing in future chapters. This chapter only goes so far, but the next chapter we deal with, Chapter 4, is going to continue with this fixed and variable and mixed costs and go farther, trying to figure out break-even points. How many units are we going to have to make till we make a profit? How many, if we have a specific profit we want to make, how many products are we going to have to sell at that point? We're going to do all that stuff in Chapter 4. So Chapter 3 is just getting us used to what is a fixed cost, what is a variable cost, how do I separate them into their two components? So spend some time working on identifying fixed and variable, working with these cost formulas so that you can create a formula like this. Sometimes it's going to mean separating a mixed cost. Other times it's just going to be totaling all your variable costs, and totaling all your fixed costs and putting them into a nice little formula. Let me know if you're having any trouble. You got lots of homework problems to work through with it. And then we'll be ready to move on to Chapter 4.